pawns. I'm more gravity. Let's play chess. I won this game about 5 minutes ago, 2, 3, or 4 minutes ago. I'm just looking at the accuracy numbers. It's sort of like medium level accuracy, not all that great, but not all that bad. But look at this funky progress graph. And my opponent had played a brilliant move along the way. There were a great number of great moves, one by my opponent, four by me, five total. That's more than usual, and I'm going to share with you my thoughts about this game. Okay, so I had the black pieces, and we played Scandinavian opening, or sometimes called the Scandinavian defense. Scandinavian defense, and then knight c3, and my queen's back to d8, knight f3, bishop c4, and I played bishop g4, going wide on sort of my bishop placement. I thought I had a really strong pin here against the knight, and white proves that that pin is not all that strong. In fact, it's a bit of a blunder to play bishop g4. The idea is if I fall for capturing the free queen, then bishop takes f7 is checkmate. And I hadn't seen this. If I'd seen this, it was a while ago. My king is completely surrounded, and the bishop's placing him in check. That's checkmate. That's checkmate. So I think the only reasonable move is bishop to e6 here, and black is in a load of trouble right off the start. Move number 6, and I'm going to have doubled central pawns in a way that inhibit the movement of my dark squared bishop. All right. Bishop c6 check. Again, I guess bishop d7 wasn't all that great. My reasoning was, if, for instance, knight takes d7, knight takes d7, bishop takes d7, queen takes d7. I'm not all that worried about that resulting position. So let's take a look. What about bishop d7 was all that bad? If for no other reason than knight to d7 puts the piece at d7 with more attackers. Is it more attackers or one more attacker, I believe? Right, because the bishop is not now blocking. He's helping with the defense here. I'm not sure about that, though, because if the bishop goes there, then we have these three protecting. Knight d7, I say queen f3. Queen to f3, I think black can play. Maybe rook to b8. It's a little bit more tactical than I had imagined, but we'll show out the computer suggestions. Knight d7, queen f3, knight f6, queen takes b7, queen to c8. So it gets a little testy here around around black's queen side. Freudian slip in the correct direction and catch your fall. Queen takes c8 and rook takes c8. I don't know, maybe just this might be lasting pressure. Rook takes c8. What's the material count there that white has an extra pawn in this rendition, in this position? All right, I don't want to dwell too much on any one move. I played bishop d7, and I guess I got away with it when I played knight to f6. Things seem to be coming, well, maybe not yet, but coming a little bit better towards black's favor after the blunder. Knight to d5. Pick up the bishop on b5, and there's no serious threat to black's king or queen or position. We have a full minor piece more than we as black have a full minor piece more than white. Knight takes f6 and captured with the g pawn is fine. This is all sort of this is all based on calculation down here. I'm gonna capture the minor piece on e5 before giving up the rook on a8, but we can earn a tempo against the queen by playing bishop to c6, but also pick up a nice pawn on g2. And the rook has to move to save from being lost, and then that is kind of a tempo for white, for black. That kind of costs white a tempo. So some of this is pretty much calculation, tactical and calculative. I would say the valuation bar has black ahead. Maybe because of the initiative. Black has the initiative right now. Right, taking advantage of the attack on the queen to save from losing a bishop on g2. Again, using the queen as a target so as to develop with tempo. For a while, white was more well developed than black. Now, I don't think so, right? We don't think so. The bishop is not developed. Actually, worse than that, it would take 2 moves, not one, count them, 2 moves for that bishop to develop. The rook is developed to g1 and is doing some good work against my bishop at g2. So we won't hold that against white's development. And then there's this other rook here that's sitting there waiting for white's bishop until it can be free. I mean, you might think, well, maybe the rook can get free along the a file, and yes, that's a great idea. I don't think it's quite in the cards right now. A4, A5, maybe the rook can get developed. Okay, yeah, I'll buy that part of it. The rook might find development, but the promotion threat, just no, not yet, too early. A move like pawn to a4, well, right away it's do something with your queen so that she's safe, and then pawn to a4 might be coming later on. Not to pursue the promotion threat all the way right away, but maybe to play rook to a3, although then bishop at f8 is controlling a3, so maybe still not this idea of a4 for white. It doesn't seem to quite work out, as white is spending a move to get to e3 and then going to a3, like I said, is covered by the bishop at f8. But this is a good move. Pinning this knight whose future is at least we're uncertain. His protection comes all the way across the pond, so to speak. At g2, I don't know why I said across the pond. That's how sometimes the British refer to the Atlantic Ocean, and that's fine. And I think sometimes Americans do that too. But at any rate, the protection's far away and under threat, and can maybe in some lines be blocked in between. So we're going to keep an eye on the knight at c6. He's not quite as safe as possible, except one other thing to all that. After all that, except one other thing, and that's, I think, bishop to d5 kind of answers a lot. Pawn to c4. So instead, I made the right move. Queen, yeah, here's it. Queen to d5. We're going to trade queens here with our pawn ahead, a full pawn. and try to rest on the fact that we have the extra piece, and that extra piece completes a bishop pair. But again, the evaluating engine has white ahead, or sorry, has black ahead in this position. I wouldn't. No, this is 5 and 10 and pick 'em, guys. Pawn to d3, knight to d4. And we're threatening two different forks. The king's involved in both of them, therefore the only chance white has at not being forked, having these pieces forked, is to move the king in one manner or another. My opponent made a reasonable move with king to d1, king to f1, torch for light likes king to f1. Just a very direct loss of pawn on c2. And I'm not so sure, because then if rook to b1, bishop takes a2, and I think I had in addition to the pawns lost on c2 and a2, no matter where that rook goes, he's going to lose himself to the exchange. He's going to lose the exchange with that. But king to e1 poses difficulty for black as well. How is black to maintain? There's got to be, like, as a chess player, we feel there's got to be something here, right? There's got to be some kind of tactic with all these targets. Some more targets than others, and I've highlighted some of them, like target. There's got to be something here for black. And I thought, well, I'll play to my intuition then, and play bishop to f3 check. And white is running out of squares. Bishop h6, not the best move, because there's this way to leave the check behind by playing king to c3, but then back, this is that intuition I'm talking about, pattern recognition, chunking intuition that comes with experience as a chess player, and a little bit of calculation. Here it comes, because I decided to liquidate on c1 first, which might not have been best, but knight to e2 check gets the exchange, wins the exchange on h1. I think then the idea is after, let's do this all right, with black to move knight to e2 check, moves out of the way of the check, let's say to b3 for argument's sake, but not be too worried about that. And then knight takes g1, so in this combination, black is now up a full rook. And you say, oh no, because we lose a piece on h6 when bishop takes h6. So picking up a piece and discovering an attack against, remember, the knight now is on g1. The saving grace of all of this is probably knight to e2, possibly knight to h3. I'm not really... Knight to h3 works because you guys park on f4 and be safe. So all this is a rather involved calculation. I thought, what do I know? I know I can trade minor pieces on c1. No matter, you might think, well, no, you forgot. Rook at g can capture on c1, and then you can't fork the rooks. That's right. I still have the king on c3, so I'll play knight to e2 check and have and I will win the exchange on this go, on this with these tactics. Here's rook to c1, just to show the point. I'm gonna do this in practice. Let's go here. Right, so maybe rook to c1, but I like a rook at a to c1, but I like rook at g to c1. This is the strongest test in your head while you're calculating a few moves earlier. This one is hard. It might not be as easy as the others to, as we say, see, or to really the board should be calculated. To calculate, well, how does that leave the board in terms of material? The final oomph by black is knight to e2 check, king moves, and the rook's gone. And won the exchange. And rook to rook in terms of pieces. White's got an extremely better pawn structure. We have 3 connected passed pawns on the queen side, and they're connected to a 4th that's not passed. But this is a contentious endgame. For all that, though, black has the bishop. Alright, so this is going back to when my opponent chose rook at a to c1. It's going to end up similar anyway. But I thought maybe rook at g to c1 was the more trying tactic calculatively. I believe that's the first time I've ever said that word. Knight to e2, king to d2, and then, like we said, knight takes c1. Okay, so this go back to it with you. The endgame here was pretty good. I don't think I let go. I let go of the lead once to a drawn or even position. Most of my moves do not let go of the lead here. Alright, if you give me a moment, I'm going to take a break, go back a few moves, and then I'll explain the end game portion, basically after the loss of the knight here, on move 24 with black to move. I'm just going to take a break and I'll be back in a minute. I say a minute, maybe probably 3 minutes. Alright. So this endgame was wild. I don't know, wild. Maybe a little bit wild. This endgame was wild and dynamic and a lot of fun. So I think we're gonna spend a good amount of time going over some of the things, how the endgame played out. My opponent plays accurately, I play accurately, and at the end of the day, we know that the bishop, we know I won, but it's because the bishop turns out to be even stronger. Having the extra bishop turns out, and a pawn to be even stronger than this really awesome queenside deluge of white pawns seeking promotion. Rook g8, definitely. This is a huge important move. Frankly, I think I want to see this on the analysis. Yeah, even more than any of this, I would say. This is very important to grab this open file. I'm glad that I noticed that right off the start. We'll go back to review. I have Torch 4 looking over my shoulder for every move. It's a great tool, though. It's great to have computers on our side. C4. Great, excellent play. The D pawn is stymied by Black's pawns and Black's light square bishop. So why not make it the backward pawn? It's already being protected. This D3 pawn. So definitely the correct pawn here is C4 right off the bat. That's starting on the right foot, or the correct foot really, whichever one, be left or right. And rook at G8 to G2 seems awesome at first, and it is still best move. But there's some, I think I found some issues with this move after pawn to B4. I thought it was going to be like this was just done and done. I'll capture on F2. The king will, not there. The king will move, and then I'll even have a second capture after that. Hopefully the part to disrupt some of this pawn mass on the queen side. If not that, then maybe we have enough time to capture on H2. That didn't happen because rook takes F2, king E3, and black will lose a piece somehow. It's the way to keep the protection of the rook keeping protection of the bishop on F3 would be to go back to F1, but then white's rook comes in and captures a full rook. So this wasn't as strong a move. This rook G2 was not quite as strong a move as I thought it might be originally. We still capture on H2. We've got fewer things to worry about, and there's situations where we can rush our H pawn in order to help with defense of the queen side if it comes to it. I just also had this intuition that my king was close enough, even if it's barely, and that this bishop could retreat either to B7 or to A8 in a way to stop these pawns in the nick of time. Not only that, but if the bishop goes to A8, there's also maybe some ideas of rook takes F2 check anyway. Now that the bishop cannot be in peril after a king E3 because the bishop's on A8, and then the rook will go along and capture on A2, and then black will have a pretty straightforward time of it. My opponent was not going to let that happen. B5, and I'm as scared as any bishop could be, right? Bishop all the way to A8. Perhaps the stronger move is on B7, but my calculations had then pawn to C5, pawn to C6. That's just two moves away, and the bishop will have to back up again. And won't I have lost a move as a result of that? So instead, I played bishop all the way back to A8. Let's make a note of best move here. It's an important point, I think. And maybe H5 to have dueling races towards promotion. Or rook to H1. Some kind of rook trade will probably be better for black than for white. Okay, bishop to A8 anyway. Not the best move, but it was more clear in my mind, and I was getting ready for a possible bishop for two pawns type of trade. I don't know why I don't know how come it seemed in my head that was a likely sacrifice I would have to contemplate. So I began contemplating that here. King to e3 is a good check on h3. How cool is this that the pawn pitches it? The white's pawn on f2 blocks a bit. The black knight, the black bishop on a8 covers a couple squares. Right? This king who's now checked, he is not going to be checkmated, but he'll have to go back, and that's going to be helpful for black in terms of timing. I guess I wanted to disrupt as my main principle at this point. I want to disrupt as much of this connectedness. You know, like when you go to war and people say they cut their supply lines first. That's what you do when there's a war. You cut your enemy's supply lines, right? So they're more scrambled. They can't coordinate, that kind of stuff. Well, that's kind of what E4 does here. This is War, Peacock. It's a great movie clue from back in the day. This is War, Peacock. I want to break these pawns up in some way that they can't just barrel down, for instance, the A file all the way to promotion. I only have as many pawns as my pawn, so this might not be easy right away. Therefore, I think D4 here was the principal move. To keep now I'm not breaking those pawns up. I got to come up with another idea, another way for black to stay strong. Rook d3 I think is pretty good. The test would be d5. The moment if there's no d5, I don't know. I mean, maybe a4, yeah. Analysis and I agree that a4 is strong, and black probably plays rook takes d4. And I'm not exactly sure. That's a whole different endgame, really, in some ways. But to break up as much of this clump of pawns from being too coordinated, really well coordinated with each other right now, and the king on e2 slightly, the pawn on f2 not all that much. d5, and then yeah, black kind of gets not quite let off the hook. It took an idea here, rook d4, with the idea of cutting off the support from the white rook on c1, letting whatever pawns enter black side of the board on the queen side here, let them deal with black's king and bishop. King d8 is because this is mostly tactical. If c7, then king c8, and pushing along the b file doesn't help because black will always have two pieces on b7. Yeah, so king d8 here is to make sure that white doesn't outrun black to c8 or b8, c8 or b8. Pawn to b6, and we almost had, as foretold, the idea of 2 pawns for bishop. It took some time. I'm a little bit saddened that I found the wrong move here. Let's take a look and see if the move that I had, if the bishop for 2 pawns had occurred, might that have made things easier. Then we'll look at how white can draw with whatever the computer saw, indicating that white can draw. And the king to c8 is still a mistake. Alright. Are we on this page now? Okay. I don't know. Actually, what did I play? Rook to c4. I'm not all that. The idea is, it seems like first of all, if there's a trade of rooks, that the h7, or the pawn that moves, the pawn on the h file, combined with the pawn on the c file, will be too much for White's king. He'll be overwhelmed, and one of them will promote. And beyond that, if, for instance, b7 then captures, rook, king to c7, and if queen's on b8, then just captures, of course. So I'm okay with rook to c4 right now. We'll look. There is one try here, as indicated by the computer. b7 immediately. I gotta play this out. I don't recognize the. I don't recognize this as a win. Something. It's probably some drawn out win. I have the block now, and with the rook still on the board, this is a different animal altogether. And it looks like black might still have a very small advantage, third of the pawn advantage. Probably gonna end up with a mistake, and then one side taking advantage, or a draw. Draws happen. That's also part of chess. All right. So, from a competitor's standpoint, I'm glad to see rook takes c4 here, because d takes c4, and I've got pawns that one of these pawns is going to queen, and I'm sure that the king and the bishop together can sort out whatever's going on the queen side. Here I chose to babysit rather than anything else. Wanted to get my pawn going, make the idea clear, and a resignation. What a crazy good game. I'm so glad that to have won, and I felt it was a really quality game all the way along. So thank you to my opponent for a great game. Okay, now I'm going to play the game out. From this point all the way to finish, I think it would be fairly straight. It would be quite and fairly straightforward. So let's do it. All right. think that's most of what I have to present for this session. I'm going to let this calculate so we can get an idea of how the playing all the way to checkmate might have changed the accuracy numbers. So that means hello. I don't know. All right. Close a couple windows. All right, a little bit. Oh, that's cool. Well, thank you all. Thank you all my viewers for watching. I had a blast sharing this game with you. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Have a great night.